Thanks very much, Joe. Just to introduce myself once more, I think it's my third time speaking, but Esther Carter, and I am Chief Strategy Officer at PAC UK. If you could move to the first slide, I'm going to give you a quick summary, some of which have already been touched on by Emma, but sort of shows that the pace of delivery that we now are entering into. If I kind of give a bit of an overview from a producer side, I'm hoping there is no one on this call that is surprised to learn that the invoices or the notices of liability have been issued. And we are fast approaching the 50 calendar day deadline for those year one payments. So a reminder for anyone who hasn't yet downloaded their NOLs, hasn't yet set up their direct debits, there are obviously lots of information out there, and I will provide the details of the customer service desk towards the end of this presentation, but just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that fast approaching. The second thing that I wanted to highlight from a producer perspective is that we are currently working towards publishing the year two illustrative fees. I've had a couple of questions as to when those will be published. We are targeting mid-December, although we are dependent on government clearance processes. So that is on track at the moment for a mid-December publication. We don't expect there to be any huge surprises in there, but what is interesting is obviously this will be the first year when we can start to look at the implications of the recyclability assessment methodology in the data that has been submitted so far through RPD. So there'll be a little bit more to come. We will set up various calls with the trade bodies as and when they are published, and we'll also set up a series of webinars for compliance schemes and others, which the registration for which will go out later today. So watch this space. There'll be lots more information coming your way, but just thought I'd put that on everyone's radar if it isn't already. From a local authority perspective then, we're now in a position where the majority of local authorities across the four nations are now aware of their year two estimated payments. And as Emma mentioned, we are now moving into the exciting phase where we're actually starting to make those payments for year one. So those payments are starting to go out this week. They are already in process. Again, most will have received grant determination letters yesterday, and the payments will be starting to hit bank accounts either later today or later on this week. And again, we'll kind of have separate communications around that, and I'll go into a little bit more detail in just a moment. It's also worth flagging from a local authority perspective that we have the improvement action processes. Those pilots that are running with 6 local authorities across the UK will be concluding across December and January, following which we'll be able to share a lot more information about how we see that process scaling up. And in fact, we were meeting with the Technical Advisory Committee for Local Authority Effectiveness and Efficiency this morning, discussing that and getting some very helpful input. From a strategy perspective, the PRO appointment process has been launched. That closes on the 12th of December with view to appointing the PRO in February, March of next year, and starting to develop the conditions of appointment of exactly how that will be working in practice. So I know lots of you on this call are involved in that process, and really great to start to hear some of the questions and work through how that will work in practice with PAC UK. I won't touch on the RAM take-back protocol now because my colleague Yogesh, who has recently joined our RAM team, will talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But I did want to highlight that we have postponed the publication of the PAC UK 5-year strategy to 2026. That is for 2 reasons. One is that we can align that strategy with the appointed PRO rather than developing something, publishing it, and then that needing to be subject to change. But also, importantly, so we can align it with the 4 nation strategies that are also in consultation or being developed, including that mentioned by Emma for DEFRA, but also for our devolved governments as well. And we want it as a delivery body, essentially in existence to deliver the strategic priorities of the 4 nations. It's really important that we have that input to help shape our thinking of how to operationalize those objectives. And then last but not least, just to flag, as I mentioned, we've had our 3 technical advisory committees for the RAM, the recyclability assessment methodology, for local authority effectiveness and efficiency, and for the communications and behaviour change. They are all meeting or have met over the course of the next couple of weeks, And we have recently appointed the new PAC UK Scheme Administrator Steering Group, which will formally be announced in the next couple of weeks, and will meet for the first time informally in December, and then later on more properly in January of next year, which will be a really important part of, again, bringing in that industry voices, those different experiences across the four nations in shaping PAC UK's thinking going forward. So a huge thank you to both everyone who has applied to be part of any of those groups, and for those that are joining us on that journey. Hugely appreciated. If we could go to the next slide. I'm just going to double click a little bit on the year one local authority payments. Some of you will remember I touched on this last time we spoke about a month ago, but now we're right in the thick of it. And as mentioned previously, those grant determination letters for Q1, Q2 payments were issued yesterday. So hopefully that isn't a surprise. As I said, the payments will be scheduled for the rest of this week. Year one's a little bit different because we have that one upfront Q1, Q2 payment, following then a separate quarterly payment for Q3, and then respectively for Q4. In future years, they'll be paid in 4 quarters, but we're just starting to get that sort of cash flow through from the producer payments and working through how we make that seamless in future years. So there will be communications, so all of that that if you haven't already seen, will be shared over the next couple of days, and I'm happy to take any questions in a moment when we get to it. So last but not least from me, and if we could go quickly to the next slide, and just a reminder that for any specific questions on your payments amounts, on recalculations, on resubmissions, we do have a service desk that is operating both via email and via phone. It is close to capacity, given, as you might expect, given we are approaching that deadline, because we have asked all producers who have problems in paying or challenges in their downloading of their notices of liability or anything else like that to contact us. But there is still, it is still operating and is there to support you with any questions that you might have. I'm going to hand then over to Yogesh to give a quick update on the RAM and the take-back scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. So for RAM update, we have 2 things to talk about. So first one is take-back protocol, which evidencing the best practices. So under RAM, the red rated packaging can achieve an amber if recycled through a compliant take-back scheme, but producer must have to produce the evidence of meeting the take-back protocol criteria when requested. So they have to provide the evidence. With the proper evidence, they can easily move from red to amber rated packaging. PAC UK hosted an industry workshop in November to share and discuss best practice approaches for meeting the RAM take-back protocol evidencing requirement. And thanks to all the participants for their positive collaboration and inputs. An article, I think the good news is it's already published, and you can go to PAC UK's website and you can see the take-back protocol best evidence practices. And if you have any question about RAM or anything which around the RAM, you can contact, as Esther mentioned, the email here, eprcustomservices@defra.gov.uk. And in terms of RAM 2027 development, so the next RAM is not version 1, not version 1.2, or not, so we are giving the name RAM 2027, which is the next version, and it's updated annually to ensure it's provide clear and fit for purpose guidance that support innovation and recyclability and discourage hard to recycle packaging formats. The next version, which is RAM 27, will be published on 1st of July 2026. We are working on it, and lots of work is already underway, and our major focus is on building a strong and transparent evidence base, incorporating user feedback from RAM version 1 and version 1.1, aligning with the relevant policy development and international practices. PAC UK approach will make full use of RAM technical advisor committees that Esther already mentioned. We also have guest members and wider industry stakeholder to ensure the scheme administrator receive advice that reflect real-world recyclability, current trends, and emerging innovation. So this is the RAM update from my side. Thank you very much. Off to Joe. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Yogesh. If we move forward to the next slide, I think I am handing over to Zoe.
And actually, you're handing over to Virginia Woolley first. Apologies. Thanks, though. So I'm Virginia Woolley. I'm the technical lead on PPR at the Environment Agency. So I'm going to provide just a bit about 24 data, bit of an update around that, and just a request from us around that. And then I'm just going to give a bit of a 2025 update on some of the highlights on what we've been up to this year. And then I'm just going to go a bit onto our enforcement response options, because I think there's a bit of interest out there about kind of our enforcement approach in PEPR. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Zoe Clark from the Environment Agency to cover a bit about reprocessed exports. Well, go straight into the 2024 data, so 2025 registration. It's just to highlight that we have had several producers that have partial data currently. So for a large producer, you should have submitted a registration file and included your payment. You should have submitted H1 2024 data and H2 2024 data. And then those would have been the main things that you'd need to have submitted for the compliance year. Where applicable, you might have had to put in a brand owner file, so a brand file as well. And then where applicable, you may have had to upload a partner file. So we have found that there are some people that have submitted partial data. So where these things are missing, we need you to make those submissions as soon as possible. So failure to provide this information is a contravention of the PEPR regulations, and this may result in enforcement action. So it's just a reminder to those out there where you have got some outstanding data, please get this uploaded onto the RPD service as soon as possible. And go on to the next slide, please. So yeah, I just want to give you a bit of an update on what we've been up to this year, because as Emma said, it's been a really busy year for us, or for everybody in PEPR. So we have undertaken an enormous data checking exercise this year. We checked the accuracy of all large and small producer data submissions, which naturally occurs biannually for large producers. So we've got over 9,500 large producer files that we need to check, because that includes subsidiaries as well. We've rapidly increased the number of producer compliance monitoring audits. So far we've done 220, but we have another 28 scheduled to take place before the end of the year. And that will continue to increase. So we're increasing the size of our teams over the next 12 months, and we already have increased the size of our teams. We're upskilling our officers, and so the number of those audits will continue to grow. We've worked really hard to bring all obligated producers into compliance, and we have developed a new site-based compliance inspection process for bringing those suspected free riders or non-compliant producers under regulatory control. So we have been sending officers out to sites which are currently not compliant, and help bring them into a compliant position. So far under these regulations, we've brought over almost 3,000 producers into compliance, which is fantastic, and we'll continue. That is a continuous job, so we will keep working to bring people into compliance. Additionally, we've continued to publish guidance to support compliance with the new regulations. There is a lot of guidance out there, and we are continually taking feedback, taking queries, and that will be a continuous process as well to make sure that we cover up all guidance that people are needing. Earlier this year, we published a whole new suite of reposter and exporter guidance and templates, but my colleague Zoe will go into that. And we continue to refine the guidance available on gov.uk. And as I say, we're already on version 7 of the regulators' agreed positions and technical interpretation guidance, with version 8 due to be published in the new year. Version 8 will be published to hopefully coincide with DEFRA's upcoming amendments. So it'll be in the early part of the year, and it will reflect some of the amendments that are going to be made. So if we go on to the next slide, please. Great. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a bit of an update about enforcement as well. We are going to continue to follow the requirements of the Regulators Code. We'll be ensuring that any enforcement response is fair, proportionate, and appropriate to the facts of the case. Factors such as intent, significance, and cooperation will continue to influence our enforcement response, much as they would have done before. Our first response to a breach is usually advice and guidance, and that will be to bring the businesses into compliance. However, we do always reserve the right to use relevant civil or criminal enforcement response options, and this is to protect the integrity of the packaging system and to ensure a level playing field is maintained. These regulations have expanded the range of civil sanctions available to us. So we have compliance notices. So that's a notice requiring a person to undertake a specified activity. We've got enforcement undertakings. These are a response option to most contraventions. So this is a response that we've actually used a lot under the 2007 packaging regulations. And we will continue to encourage people to offer enforcement undertakings to address non-compliance. Under the 2007 regs, charities and environmental projects received over £10 million as a result of this particular enforcement undertakings. So they can be a very effective enforcement tool. We also have fixed monetary penalties and variable monetary penalties, and I'm going to go on to them in a bit more detail in a moment. So it's also just important to highlight that the burden of proof for use of civil sanctions under the 2024 regulations is on the balance of probabilities. This is a lower standard of proof than the criminal standard, which was under the 2007 regs, which is beyond all reasonable doubt. So again, it should help ensure that we can do swift and effective enforcement action under these new regulations. I'll just go on to the next slide, please. So I did mention these new civil sanctions. We've got fixed monetary penalties. So that's a £1,000 penalty, which can increase to £1,500 if not paid within 56 days. So the kind of contraventions that this would cover, things like failing to keep records, failure to provide information that we've asked for, failure to submit certificate of compliance, which is due by the end of January 2026. And failure to comply with an information notice. So they're the kind of contraventions that would fit with a fixed monetary penalty. So if we go on to the next slide. So, we have got the fixed, and then we've got the variable monetary penalties. So these are uncapped financial penalties. So Annex 4 of our enforcement and sanctions policy, which was recently updated, explains how we would calculate those these variable monetary penalties, or VMP. But essentially, the bigger the business, the bigger the penalty. And this fits with the kind of contraventions like failure to report packaging data by the deadline, failing to register, failure to satisfy your recycling obligation, and failure to undertake recyclability assessments, as referenced by Esther earlier. So our approach to calculating that VMP is set out, as I say, in our ESP, and it's based on the Sentencing Council's definitive guideline for sentencing of environmental offences. So I just want to give a bit more detail on VMP. So if you go on to the next slide, please. Oh, I think there was a slide before then, but anyway, that's fine. I've just here this is to provide just a bit of a scale and a bit of example about how variable monetary penalties could be applied. So this is the scale of a penalty for a category 1 harm. So a category 1 harm is something that could affect the disposal fee system and the recycling obligation. A category 2 harm might be something that affects one of those systems, and then a category 3 harm would affect neither of those systems, but is still a contravention. So this is an example of a category 1 harm scale of a VMP. So you can see across the top there, you've got the level of culpability that we would have to, that would be part of our investigation. And you can see the scales of the penalties that could apply. So it's just to give you, these are very broad ranges, but we really want to make it clear to people that there are significant variable monetary penalties that can come alongside these regulations. So hopefully that provides just a bit of context for people when thinking about, in terms of complying with EPR. So I'm just I'm now going to so that's kind of the end of the producer side of the system here. So I'm actually going to pass over to my colleague, Zoe Clark, and she can cover the next few slides. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you, Virginia. Right. So as Virginia mentioned, there's been a lot of exporter and reprocessor guidance coming out. I think you'll probably have seen most of these pages in this forum before, but just to quickly run through them. That first bullet point there is the updated guidance for reprocessors and exporters kind of main page. We are taking on feedback sent to us, and we will get these pages updated. So please do continue to offer that feedback. And that goes for across reprocessors and exporters in general as well. We are collating all feedback that's getting sent in to take into account and try and make improvements. The second bullet point there is the application forms for 2026 and their corresponding instructions. Hopefully you're all aware of those by now, but if you haven't got your applications in yet, please do so as soon as possible, as I say, if you haven't already. The next bullet point there is the sampling and inspection plan supplementary guidance. That goes with your sampling and inspection plan template, and that is something that needs to be completed and submitted with your application. And then the last bullet point there is the newest one, really. That is the summary log templates and guidance for UK packaging waste. They have been updated recently to include a new template. Hopefully you received comms on that yesterday. That is for accredited exporters, and there was already an accredited reprocessor issuing on inputs template and guidance available too. Please direct any queries on any of that to the email address that is on screen. And also just to say, we are obviously aware that we promised with the webinar on the 11th of November, that was a dedicated reprocessor and exporter webinar, that we would share a recording. That is coming. We will get that to you as soon as possible. If I could have the next slide, please. Okay, so if you haven't heard already, the summary logs will be the method of recording your packaging waste activity and how you will get it into the digital service once that's ready. Many of you will have known this as waste recording previously on MPWD. The new regulations require a lot more data, you'll probably have seen. So an Excel file template has been created, which you can maintain and then upload and submit. You need to maintain this log from the 1st of January. You can upload it as much as you like, but as a minimum, registered only operators must upload and submit the log at least once every quarter. And for accredited operators, you must upload and submit monthly. Those dates are in line with regulatory reporting requirements, and those reports must be verified by an approved person. Again, that's a regulatory requirement. As I say, you can upload this as frequently as you like to update your packaging waste data on the system. And yeah, those minimum requirements are there on the screen, so you'll have them when the recording of this forum comes out. Just to say as well, for accredited operators, the data you provide will be used to calculate your waste balance, from which you will then be able to raise and issue your PRNs and PERNs. You can edit and upload the same document so that you only need to maintain one file per material for registration or accreditation. If you're accredited, you don't need to maintain both a registered and accredited log. There's no need for duplication there. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the summary log guidance was updated yesterday. That can be found on gov.uk. You should hopefully have had an email about that. It covers summary log information page, summary log data definitions page, those example templates that I mentioned for accredited reprocessors issuing on waste received, so inputs, and accredited exporters. The summary log templates are currently being finalised. There will be some more templates coming out as we work to implement changes based on the latest round of user research. There was a walkthrough of one of those summary log templates during that webinar I mentioned on the 11th of November. So if you weren't able to attend that, once we've got that recording out, you should be able to see that walkthrough as well. Next slide, please. So this is a digital service update I'm just giving on behalf of DEFRA here. As we've been mentioning, obviously the new regs come into force for January 2026, and you need to start recording your packaging waste that you receive or export for recycling from the start of January using those templates that we have just discussed. You will receive the next set of communications on any preparation you need to do in order to be able to access the digital service in the new year. Hopefully we'll get that next set of communications out to you mid-December, and then from early January you'll start to receive invitations to access the service with a full range of supporting information. DEFRA will roll out functionality gradually from January onwards, starting with the ability to upload your summary logs, and they will be learning and gathering feedback throughout and tweaking to make improvements where possible. Please do sign up to our user research panel to get involved. As we move into what's called the private beta phase, we'll be undertaking continuous rounds of user testing to gather feedback and user insights about the service. And we're looking at the best way to keep you all informed about releases and future updates as well. Next slide, please. This is just a forward look. So for reprocessors and exporters, the mandatory registration, your quarterly reports are first due on the 21st of April. For those accredited, it's monthly reports, and the first of those is due the 21st of February. Under the 2007 packaging regulations, 2025 accredited reprocessors and exporters need to submit their Q4 return and revenue report on MPWD by the 28th of February. For producers, the certificate of compliance with 2025 recycling obligations is due at the end of January, and the nation of sale data collection and reporting, that collection starts January 2026, and the first report will be due the 1st of April 2027. The aggregated packaging data update was published the 15th of November, and there is an extraordinary update planned for mid-December. The amending SI was laid on the 3rd of November, so that's subject to parliamentary approval and will bring in further changes from the 1st of January 2026, including updated charges that apply from CIF data on all charges. I think that is it from me.
So we added this slide in the end here because it was it kind of got brought up at the last forum where there was just a bit of confusion about who to contact on certain subject areas. So it's just a slide that gives you a bit of a high level overview of the organisations in the PPR system. So you've got DEFRA, who lead on the policy and the drafting of the regulations. And they've developed and host the digital platform for PPR, so RPD system, as we referred to earlier in our update. They've been developing guidance, and they can respond to questions and comments on the policy and using that digital system. We've then got the regulators, so there are 4 regulators in the UK. So you've got Environment Agency covering England, and then you've got Northern Ireland Environment Agency covering Northern Ireland, Natural Resource Wales covering Wales, obviously the Scottish Environment Protection Agency covering Scotland. So if you have compliance queries, if you want to come to us with those queries, we look at online marketplace methodologies. We'll receive the data on the digital service, and we'll be doing a lot of checks, as I referred to earlier, and we'll be sending queries based on the data that we look at. So if you do have questions on compliance, please feel free to get in touch. We've got teams in place to make sure we come back to you as quickly as we can. And if there is any feedback on the guidance, so say the agreed positions guidance, which I referred to earlier, please let us know, because we are continuously improving those as well, or adding to them. And then we have PAC UK. So Esther was on earlier, and she provided some of the contact details as well. So if you do have questions about your notice of liability, things, the recyclability assessment, things like that, we'd always recommend you go to PAC UK, to the service, the help desk email address, so that the DEFRA service desk, and then there's the email, the telephone number as well. If one of these groups does receive a query that's actually meant for one of the others, we will triage it to the right place. So, if you do send something to us that's on your notice of liability, we will triage it to PAC UK, but it's always better to go direct to the correct person if you can. But your query won't get lost. It'll definitely get triaged to the right place. But yeah, so that was just, I'd say, as a hangover from the last presentation, just to make sure it's really clear.